But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and talk about business communication today, which is ultimately probably what you thought you were going to be learning about when you came into this class. But business communication is just a smaller sect of professional communication. We've talked about different types of communication throughout the semester, with I would say the most important one being interpersonal, because interpersonal is when you do what? It's how you manage your relationships, okay? So, we're going to take a look at business communication here really quick. An essential question I want you to ask yourself is, what things should I keep in mind when communicating with peers and supervisors that will help me be a successful employee and coworker? And there are a lot of different ways that we can answer that question, but again, knowing me, you know that my key answer is going to have to do with communication. Making sure that you are open and honest in the things that you're saying at work and with your coworkers helps you a lot. So that's just kind of a question I want y'all to keep in mind while we go through this really quick. It's super short today. It'll take probably 10 minutes, hopefully. So, yeah, we want to talk about the things that will be helpful when you are communicating with people at work. So, by the end of this lesson, the things that I want you to be able to do is tell the difference between proper and improper behavior when you're working with people, and analyze what is important to do when faced with a workplace dilemma. So, this means whether you're having an issue with a coworker or your boss, I want you to be able to learn how to manage those things appropriately. So, some keywords we're going to take a look at are communication. You guys should know this one by heart now. It's the sending and receiving of messages for the purpose of building relationships. Respect, that one's a pretty common word. It's the admiration of someone elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievements. Then you've got boundary, supervisor, and protocol. So, boundaries are limits that we set to keep ourselves safe. Supervisors are the people who are in charge of you, so your boss or a coworker who is above you. And protocol are just steps that you follow. Protocol is the norm. It's what we do, how we do it, and pretty much what your day-to-day life looks like. So let's talk about professionalism a little bit. When you get a new job, whether it's a high school hourly wage job, whether it is a professional job after you graduate college, you're going to meet coworkers, and you will more than likely make friends with these people if you are lucky. I'm very, very lucky in the fact that a lot of my very, very, very good friends are people who I work with, and we'll talk about that in a little bit and what that looks like in the world of professionalism. So it's tempting to joke around when you first meet people, but the most important thing is to be professional. You want to gauge kind of where people are at, because you don't know how they're going to respond to things. You don't know what their sense of humor is like, so on and so forth. So before you jump in and, put on your stand-up set, you might want to gauge the waters a little bit before you go about showing too much of your humor, because you want to make sure that you're around people who will appreciate the things that you're saying. Also, you want to always make sure that you remain calm when you interact with customers or clients in the work environment, because not everybody is going to appreciate your sense of humor. You want to make sure you think before you speak. As somebody who talks a lot and cracks a lot of jokes, I have had to learn this the hard way several times, because especially when I was younger, did not think before I speak. If you can, if you can imagine that, I just kind of let words roll out of my mouth, and they would get me in trouble sometimes. So I would highly recommend making sure that you just pay attention to your surroundings and kind of gauge where people are at before you go about getting too witty or too crazy, okay? This is for those of you, like I said, who are a little more extroverted, who like building those relationships with people. Just make sure you remain professional. So, getting along with coworkers. This can be really, really, really easy, or it can be really, really, really hard. When you have a job that you really enjoy, work can be fun. I, again, am super, super, super thankful that I have a job that I love. I have students who I really care about. I love what I get to do. I love getting to teach speech. I love getting to coach debate. And I love the department that I work in. I've gotten very, very, very lucky here at Lake Creek. But not everybody is always as lucky. I've definitely been in situations where it's not even that I didn't get along with my coworkers. It was just that everybody kind of already had their own set groups that they were with, and they weren't looking for new friends, they weren't looking for new people. Okay, so it's really important for you to try as best as you can to get along with your coworkers. You might not get along with everyone. Spoiler alert. I am not best friends with every single person that I work with, and that's okay. You don't have to like everybody, but you do have to be respectful towards everybody because at the end of the day, you all have a common goal. In teaching, it's making sure that you guys are well educated, and everything that we do is in service of um, of what's best for you guys. Okay, so that's something that I have to remind myself that while I might not care for the way somebody else is doing things in their classroom, ultimately we all have the same goal. So you might not get along with everybody, but you have to at least be neutral. However, if you run into a problem that you're not able to solve on your own, you need to tell somebody because there are definitely situations in which you might have an issue with somebody and you need to have somebody ahead of, like, above you intervene. So, boundaries are also super important, especially creating healthy boundaries. So, boundaries, like I said, are the things that we put up in order to keep ourselves safe. So, these can be physical boundaries, they can be emotional boundaries, they can be social boundaries. This, more specifically, talking about it in the workplace, we're talking about social boundaries because of the relationships that you're building with the people that you work with. You want to, at all costs, guys, avoid gossiping about others. If you wouldn't say it to somebody, don't say it at all. This doesn't just go for the workplace, this goes for life in general. And trust me, I know that this is extremely difficult, and it can get even more difficult when your coworkers are also your really good friends. I get it, guys. But like I said, this is the best way to set healthy boundaries, especially with people who you don't really know. If it's somebody who you're just acquaintances with and that you just pass in the hallway, probably best to not air somebody else's dirty laundry to them, which I have had happen before. People who I don't really know will stop me in the hallway and say, "Hey, did you hear what so and so said or what so and so did?" And I'm like, "Hey, man, we're not friends, okay?" So avoid gossiping about others. And if you know that two coworkers aren't getting along, don't get involved. Don't take sides. Don't gossip about either one of them to the other person. Guys, that is bad, bad, bad news. Thankfully, I've never been in this kind of situation. However, I know people who have, and guess what? It does not help anybody, it only adds to the problem. So, getting to know your boss. I am extremely grateful for one, Mr. Phil Eaton. I have one of the best bosses I could ever possibly ask for. So, getting to know my boss has been different than I think a lot of other people's experiences have been with getting to know their bosses because Mr. Eaton is so personable and because one of his main goals is to make sure that our staff and our faculty feel welcomed and appreciated. And that is something that I'm extremely, extremely thankful for. So, getting to know him has been nothing but a joy and a pleasure. However, that's not always the norm. Not everybody works in education, not everybody has a principal over them. You might have a boss who you don't get to see very often, or a boss who you just don't have a good relationship with. Um, I work a second job during the summer when I'm not teaching you guys. I teach debate on the East Coast at some prep schools, and so I have another boss named Ron who I see quite often during the summer, and my relationship with him and the relationship that I have with Mr. Eaton are two very, very different relationships. mostly for the fact that Ron is not somebody who I see on a daily basis. I really touch base with him a couple of times a year, and then I see him throughout the summer because he actually owns several camps and schools that I work at throughout the summer, and so he pops in at one of any of the 30 or 40 locations every once in a while. So it took me a while to figure out kind of, what his personality was like, what his sense of humor was like, things like that. And so I had to kind of keep to myself, so to speak, in order to gauge how I could do the best work and get to know him as best as I could. So some people, if you'll see here, some bosses may not mind if you swear or complain about work. However, you should generally avoid it. My kind of my one of my other bosses at the camp that I work at, named Chuck. He is a big, tall Irish man from New Jersey, which means that he swears like a sailor. And so when we were in our staff meetings, he would let it rip and he would apologize. He'd be like, "Oh, Marissa, I know you're from Texas. You Southern people don't swear." And I was like, "Ooh, who are you kidding?" You've clearly never met anybody from Texas. And so we were able to build that relationship, and knowing that he was more comfortable with that was something that worked well for me. But you never know. Chuck was comfortable with that, but that's not something I would ever do in front of Ron, like I said, who's the CEO of the company that I work for. So a social tip about that is, for the most part, keep your personal life private. Only talk about these things if it's absolutely necessary: illness, family problems, money, so on and so forth. So, also respecting your boss. Sometimes you might not get along with your boss. You might not get along with your coworkers, and at the end of the day, you're going to have to be okay with that. So, two things you need to do are keep your cool and fake it until you make it. That's something I say to you guys all the time when you're giving speeches. And it's just a great life tip in general. Fake until you make it. You might not like somebody, but you can handle them, okay? Bosses can be difficult sometimes. However, if they're not being professional and you feel like they might be breaking protocol or breaking any kind of rules, you have every right to file a complaint if you're not being treated fairly, guys. And we'll talk about workers' rights a little bit later on in the week. But if you feel like your boss is being inappropriate or unprofessional, you have every right to file a complaint and make sure that that issue is taken care of. Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, okay? So, just the last thing I want to talk about, some tips for thriving on the job. Obviously, be on time and be prepared. Those are things that you should do no matter what. You do them at school, you need to be doing your job as well. Be sociable. So yes, engage with your coworkers, talk to them, see what their lives are like, build those relationships, because it's so, so, so important to build relationships with people that you work with. Additionally, go above and beyond, get ahead. If you know that you are good at something, guys, take that skill and amplify it. Nobody has ever gotten fired for doing good work or for doing too much work, okay? So stick to deadlines. Know that when something is due, it is due. You need to get stuff done when it is due. Finally, my favorite one here, find a mentor. Find somebody older than you who's been with your company for a while, who knows what's going on with the company, and who can help you throughout your process as an employee there. So help somebody who can